pictures on the left. Trinity College London are an examination board, and my essential interest is in teacher training rather than business English specifically. We do a range of examinations, DipTESOL examinations, TESOL, teaching English qualifications, also performance arts. So if there's any budding ballerinas or ballerinos out there, let me know. We can arrange some examinations for you. I'm sure some of you will be interested. I know Duncan said earlier that he was interested in some of these examinations.
Yeah, I don't always tell you the truth.
Okay. Well, my first confession today is that I haven't taught business English since 1995. And so therefore I'll just talk about how things were in 1989 and a little bit but I think my experience is instructive here because I think it might be quite typical. I mean, my interest here today is really what do maybe experienced EFL teachers, but people new to business English teaching, what do they need in order to get their leg up the ladder, in order to be competent business English teachers stroke trainers. I use the term teacher pointedly as well, because I never saw myself as a trainer. Maybe that was my error, but I saw myself very much as an English teacher first, a business English trainer very much second. And I think that was pretty much to do with the times and the continuum of it. But so I took a Cert TEFL, went out to Italy, and immediately I was given some business English classes to teach. For example, my first student was a one-to-one guy. He was a pharmacologist. He needed business English in order to, he needed to be able to give talks at conferences, and he needed me to be able to help him with that. I think I did a pretty poor job with him. On the other hand, I don't think it was my fault. Because a lot of language, I don't know if this is true anymore, I'm sure it doesn't happen anymore anywhere in the world, but at that time language schools would go out to people and say, promise them the earth in order to get the contract, and then not give the proper support to the teachers, to the trainers to have. So that was perhaps an issue. So what I was doing, as I said, was English teaching in a business context, not teaching people to do business in English. I think there's an important distinction to be made between the two. Mostly what I did was in-company one-to-one, and some ESP. The ESP ranged from waiters, who needed a very limited repertoire of English perhaps, but nevertheless it was important for them to get the intonation right and that sort of thing, up to oil drillers from Kazakhstan, for example. And as I developed things got better. I mean, the freelance opportunities came my way, and I was turning into, to some extent, a trainer in that I had to make a pitch to people in order to explain to them what objectives that I would pursue with them, how I would evaluate their programs. A lot of the materials I was given were generic materials. So they might be just general English textbooks, business English textbooks that never seemed to meet my students' needs. So then I had to do the development myself, work out how I could find materials in order to advance that, etc. So there was, particularly at the start of when I was teaching this, a lack of professional planning, both on the part of the organisations that I worked for, and from me as well. So what kind of CPD was available? Professional development was available to me when I started off as a business English trainer, teacher. Needs analysis, they never seemed to help me. They always seemed to be pretty useless. They would identify that a learner would need to be able to give presentations in English, for example. But they all needed that, so it didn't really get us any further to have that. I had 30 minutes input on my certificate course, just a pep talk to an audience as large as this about, teaching business English. I was told I had to wear a suit, for example, that sort of thing. Which I never did. Okay. The way I developed myself, I did a lot of reading. I read the financial press, I read other business textbooks, that type of thing, company literature if I was working in specific companies, business English literature, methodology books. All this was a lot more helpful to me than the kind of business textbooks that I was given or pushed into my hand when I was going to meet a client. Another main insight that I think I gained is my general teacher education, general teacher training. For example, I learnt about a range of approaches. Task-based learning, for example. Lexical approach. These things were lifesavers because I saw how they worked much better than the sort of PPP approach that I'd been given on my Cert course, using the learner as a resource. Reflective practice. I could reflect on what I did and evaluate programs and work from there. These kind of things really helped me. Conference conference attendance and workshops, well, they were occasional, they were infrequent. But if you're just starting out as a teacher, you know, it's very difficult to afford too much of this, both in terms of time and money. So people say, okay, you're CPD, go to the conference, there's a great lot of talks. But it was often difficult for me to do that. The thing that was the most important thing, I think, was mentoring from more experienced tutors who'd been there before, who were big business English tutors who'd been doing it for years. And they were able to tell me, okay, if you go to this company and someone's in this sort of role, this is what they need, that type of thing. Okay. So it's very rudimentary, very limited. And I just wonder, I mean, I just have an open question, is it any better now for people starting out as business English trainers? You would say so, incontrovertibly, that someone who's sort of in their first year of business English training has more available to them.
Organisation, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think by the time I was finishing doing it in 1995, things were becoming a lot more organised. There was a lot more planning that went into it. It wasn't just a case of selling someone a business English course like it was a general English course. So there was much more kind of professionalism being devoted to it. So some trends that we perhaps have to take account of when thinking of developing ourselves as business English trainers. As I've already mentioned, there's a difference, I think, between training people to do business in English versus teaching English in a business context. What I did was purely, I think, teaching English in a business context, certainly initially. Whereas training people to do business English encompasses so much more. It might encompass communication training, life coaching, intercultural awareness training, all these kind of things. And within that context, what were formerly language schools have perhaps rebranded themselves as training centres, and there's a continuum there. About 40% of the language schools in the UK now do some form of business English training. And some of them very much have a limited range of courses, whereas some of them offer a whole range of things. And I think as trainers we need to become used to the idea of what it is that we need to know above and beyond English language teaching in order to be able to develop ourselves. Even if we're not going to become experts at intercultural awareness, for example, we still need to be aware of that dimension. So there are these areas that need to be brought into it. General expansion of business English courses, ESP materials, specialist examinations, there seems to be a lot more that's come in. Globalization, ELF. These are things that we all need to take awareness of, need to be aware of, and need to build into any kind of training program. ICT needs is a big one. Not just what we need to know, what kind of tools we need as a trainer in order to be able to develop ourselves and in order to be able to teach more effectively and use the full range of ICT tools that are out there, but what our business English learners are using, what our clients are using. We need to be very clear about that, so that's a training area. Often it's said that business English clients are the most demanding in the EFL, in the ESOL world. But I think the truth is that general English is in a kind of long, slow decline, if you like. What we might call ENSP, English for no specific purpose. Characterised the industry in the past, perhaps. That's finishing. I mean, if you think that your business English clients are demanding, try talking to a Chinese parent, for example, about their 3-year-old. Yeah, you know, we all as EFL teachers, ESOL practitioners, whatever, trainers, whatever we want to call ourselves, need to become much more skilled at identifying needs, identifying what the learners need specifically in a particular context and dealing with that, and providing them with goals, providing them with assessments that cover that. So there's a whole kind of range of trends there. Here's a few sort of statements about business English trainers then. We need to understand the training needs, training context of the learners that they teach, be familiar with their learners' roles. These were things that I learned on the job, but perhaps there's some training that can be done that would allow people to have the analytical tools that will enable them to do that much more effectively, much more quickly. A range of approaches and skills. A lot of EFL teachers stick to tried and tested methods, approaches that work for them in particular contexts. And that is not enough in a business English context. I had so many different learners, clients over the years who needed a different approach. For some, a lexical approach worked really, really well. Others, that wasn't really their priority, and we needed to work on even sort of community language learning. Somewhere around 90% don't go on to do any other kind of formal training during their careers. They might do lots of CPD, they might learn on the job, but the kind of formal training, and therefore the perceived professionalism of the teachers. I mean, it goes back to the first session that we had today, where we're talking about selling ourselves. But there also needs to be a push, a bottom-up push from the industry in order to make sure that the whole aura of professionalism is improved. What we have been offering since end of 2007, 2008 is the Cert IBET, the Certificate in International Business English Training. This is a 50-hour program. It can be taken intensively, it can be taken part-time. And the idea is to give people the essential balance of skills and knowledge and professional development and awareness that they will need in order to be competent business English trainers. That's at a basic level. A lot of it, it's a very short course, so a lot of it is at a rudimentary level, but we're looking at ways of extending that as well. Looking at the typical candidate, it's quite interesting. Almost 3 quarters, when we did a survey a couple of years ago, I think it would be pretty much the same these days, almost 3 quarters had 5 years ELT experience or more. Whereas the entry criteria are set at people having little or no teaching experience, as a minimum. Obviously the maximum could be much higher. So it seems to be the case from this, I could possibly deduce that people are moving from general EFL to business English later than I did, certainly. Which sort of chimes in with what you were saying about professionalism and the fact that, there needs to be, you need to work with much more experienced teachers who are able to take account of some of the trends, some of the important things that I was talking about earlier. Their business English experience was much lower, only 17% of the candidates had business English experience. Which again was interesting. I would have expected more people on the programme to be already in a business English context. So that's quite interesting. 31% had a diploma or an MA, so a lot already have high-level qualifications in teaching English. What they need is something specific for business English. A lot of them working freelance as well. We built this very much into our assumptions of the programme, that they might have to deal directly with companies. They might not just be working within a language training organisation that will provide the objectives, the materials, the programme, but also that they would need to make a pitch perhaps directly to an HR department. That might be the sort of thing that they would have to do. And a lot of them wanted to go further. They wanted what we might call a DIP IBET. They wanted a diploma level of qualification as well. So the modules that we came up with, I mean, obviously we'd start with something like what is business English, concepts and language, etc. The idea was to meet people's knowledge needs, the kind of knowledge that they need in order to be a business English trainer, and also the types of skills that they needed. One interesting thing which we've had mixed feedback from is having a module on professional development and employment and making that a compulsory part of the programme. So looking at the programme, our aim is to go beyond the teaching English for business that I was referring to earlier and look at other areas that may be important for people's future development. And I think any kind of CPD programme, whether it's a formal course like this or not, needs to reach out to these sort of areas and these sort of needs of trainers. So things like, for example, working with HR departments. You might need to make a report to them, or you might need to make a pitch to them. Making a pitch to a company, knowing who to deal with, who are the important people, and how to get your message right so that you sell the right program. I think these are sort of skills that we can teach that go above and beyond what an EFL teacher would be expected to know. How to evaluate a program. These are the kind of things that are covered very poorly, I think, generalising massively, but are covered poorly on things like certificate or diploma courses. We tend to look at the lesson as something in itself and assess that lesson. And we're very good at coming up with assessment criteria to decide whether a teacher has been effective. But have they been effective in a broader sense? Have they been able to develop a whole scheme of work, evaluate a program properly against its initial objectives, refine those objectives, etc. So those sort of areas are things that we need to build into the Cert IBET and any DIP IBET qualification as well. ICT support. Again, we can only make a start on that, but making people aware of the tools and resources that are out there and the full range of them and how to use them effectively for pedagogical purposes. I think that obviously needs to be built into the program. Things like cultural awareness, awareness of corporate cultures. These are other areas that are very important. Research tools, and in general I would say strategies for expanding people's knowledge. For the IBET we have, this year we have 4 assignments. For the first assignment they have to develop a 50-hour program and talk about what that program would consist of and what kind of objectives they would set for their learner and provide a needs analysis of their learner. For the second one, the focus is on materials. So the focus is on developing a set of business English materials, and I've got a whole library of this stuff, which is incredible what people are coming up with. Their ability to use ICT tools or not, but they're producing things for which you couldn't devise a course book for because it's really tailored to the individual learner. So there's an incredible kind of body of work there, and I think we need to do something with that. You know, research it, use it, even publish some of it, because otherwise it's just going to sit in a vault somewhere and it's been assessed and it's been passed. But there's a whole contribution to this industry that is being made there with these assignments. And there's about 400 people who've done assignments of this kind so far. The third assignment focuses on an overseas trade delegation. So we change that one every year. That will be focusing on a specific context, if people want to do that. But the fourth assignment is rather different. Submitting a written proposal for a 10-hour business English program for a group of learners. So it's you dealing directly with a company. So you provide a profile of the company, the group, the needs analysis if you like, and then structure your written proposal, the key elements within it, and how to maximise your chances of having the proposal accepted. So what sort of follow-up work would you do? So here we're very much moving away from the teacher to the trainer. And so that, I think that's an important part of the course, that those who want to, and some people will not want to engage with this sort of thing just yet, because maybe they're starting out as business English trainers. They're more happy to work within organisations, within departments that will provide them with objectives that will do all this kind of work for them, and then they will go and deliver the programme. But for others, they may want to expand their horizons a little bit. So these are some of the areas that we're focusing on. Okay, that's about it for me. Thank you.